Ignition sequence start. All engines up.
We have taken tremendous steps.
We choose to go to the moon before this decade is out.
We have achieved the earth-shaking, the breathtaking, the groundbreaking,
One small step for man,
and left a mark in the heavens. Our successes build one upon another and amplify what is possible.
The dawn of Orion.
It's time we take the next great leap. We're building the next chapter of American exploration, returning to the moon to stay, so we can go beyond to Mars, to expand what's possible and further our understanding. The architecture for these missions is already taking shape. We will go with new systems, bold designs, and a sustainable mission. You can hear it, taste it, touch it. We are going. We are training, testing, pressing our pioneering spirit into every component, defining our resolve with every line of code, and securing our success with every welcomed partnership. This is not hypothetical. This is not about flags and footprints. This is about sustainable science and feeding forward the advance of the human spirit. Because we are the pioneers, the star sailors, the thinkers, the visionaries, the doers. And because we stand on the shoulders of giants to go farther than humanity has ever been, we will add our names to the rolls of the greatest adventurers in history. Every day, every mission, we advance this calling. We are NASA. And after 60 years, we're just getting started.
Good morning, and welcome to the nation's premier multi-user spaceport, the Kennedy Space Center. That was a great video. What really stuck with me were the lines, "We do stand on the shoulders of giants." Think about that. So here we're in the historic Operations and Checkout building. This building was first opened in 1964. The ribbon cutting was done by Mercury astronauts Gus Grissom and John Young. Think about that history. And so we followed Apollo with the Space Shuttle program, the International Space Station, and now as we embark on this new era of space exploration, it's a very exciting time. So I'm Kelvin Manning. I'm the Associate Director here at the Kennedy Space Center. My boss, Bob Cabanos, in Moscow. The Deputy, Janet Cavandi's stuck at Langley because of the winter storm. And it reminds me of a story where when we renamed this building in 2014 in honor of Neil Armstrong. So we had Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins here. And I had lunch sitting at the table with Mike Collins, shaking his hand. And he goes, I know all about what it's like to be the third guy. So I'm the third guy and filling in. So today we welcome our partners, our employees, and those playing an important role in the support of the future of space exploration, to share a milestone in our preparation for Exploration Mission 1. Unfortunately, also our NASA administrator, Jim Bridenstine, was not able to join us today because of the inclement weather as well. But he was able to tape a message this morning to share with us all. So we'll play that video now.
Today we celebrate the delivery of the European Service Module, and I can say the United States of America is very grateful for our partners at the European Space Agency and all of its member nations. This is a momentous occasion where we're going to have the opportunity to fly into deep space, and the European Service Module is a huge element of this architecture. It's going to provide power, electricity, propulsion, and eventually it will carry air and water for life support. I just want to say thank you to all of our suppliers. Internationally, This is a collaboration that demonstrates that all of us can do more when we work together. So thank you, congratulations, and let's go to the moon and on to Mars.
So today, we are here to celebrate a new beginning. As we reach for the moon and beyond, the future of innovation in deep space exploration lies along a path of cooperation and collaboration. The European Service Module is key to powering the Orion spacecraft, taking humans further into space than any other spacecraft before. This is also about progress. This piece of flight hardware is an example of what can be, this piece of flight hardware is an example of what can be achieved by working across space agencies, countries, and industry. Hundreds of suppliers, businesses, and their employees from both sides of the Atlantic have taken on the engineering obstacles of deep space travel and overcome challenges to create this powerhouse element needed in order for us to explore the moon and beyond. Edward Everett Hale, an American author with a way of words, wrote, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success." A new beginning, today's progress, and a milestone for success. This is working together for the benefit of humankind. The European-built service module builds upon NASA's many years of cooperation and success with the European Space Agency on the International Space Station and deepens international collaboration. You know, next week we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of the first assembly flight for the ISS. Think about that. It's been 20 years. What a remarkable success. And Kennedy Space Center is proud to play an integral part in supporting the missions of the space station and now the next generation of rockets and spacecraft for our exploration campaign. With the Space Launch System, the Orion Multi-Purpose Crew Vehicle, and a revitalized 21st century space launch complex here in Florida, we are developing core capabilities for exploring the moon and Mars in our lifetimes. NASA, ESA, and our other partners will answer some of humanity's fundamental questions about life beyond Earth. The team here at KSC is also dedicated to building upon these partnerships that will keep us all at the forefront of the space industry, for working together is a success. And in each milestone of success, Kennedy Space Center can be the bridge to the future. I would say that stronger, Kennedy Space Center will be the bridge to the future. So on behalf of our Center Director, Bob Cabana, and the rest of the men and women at Kennedy Space Center, I welcome our distinguished guests. So before I introduce our panel of speakers, I'd like to welcome some of our special guests in the audience. First, Thad Altman, Florida State Representative. Don't see him. And then Erin Waldron, Director of Community and Economic Development for the Office of Congresswoman Val Demings. Welcome. And also in the audience from NASA, Glenn Research Center Director, Janet Cavandi. And Vanessa Weish, the Deputy Director of the Johnson Space Center. And NASA astronaut, Randy Bresnik. And also a few guests from our partner organizations, David Parker, the ESA Director of Human Spaceflight and Exploration. And Mike Hawes, Vice President and Orion Program Manager for the Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company. And finally, our Executive Vice President and Head of the Airbus Space Systems, Nicholas Chamoussi. Again, welcome. So we're going to transition. I have the great pleasure to introducing a fantastic panel joining us today to talk more about the service module and where it will go as we continue with the preparations for Exploration Mission 1. First up, we have Bill Hill, Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems from NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Kelvin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this great event. I'm very happy to finally get here. This has been a long time coming. I was here last week for another reason, but got a chance last Thursday morning around 6:15 to come in and take a look at the service module. Our team was just beginning to conduct what's called the transportation integrity checks, which is a series of checks to make sure that nothing happened to the vehicle as we shipped it. Thankfully, all went well, and all the results were the same here as they were in Bremen. I was thrilled to finally see the service module. I kind of wanted to go up and give it a welcoming hug, but they wouldn't let me do that, so we'll save that for some other time. What was more exciting, though, is just to see our test team and the smiles on their faces, because they were just beginning to conduct the test and powering up the vehicle for the day. And, you know, because it's here, they now got a chance to do their critical work. The arrival of the European Service Module is a crowning achievement of the European Space Agency, Airbus, the many European and American vendors that provided equipment to form the European Service Module, as well as NASA and Lockheed. And this positions us to be much closer to launch. Together, we are building an integrated system for humans that travel farther into our solar system than ever before. It is a partnership with the European Space Agency that is enduring and has lasted and will last for many decades to come. Directly behind me is the actual European Service Module. It's the kind of bluish. It's encased in a mylar. Above that is the crew module adapter, and we're in the process of mating those two units. Directly behind that is the clean room, and then behind there is the Exploration Mission 1 crew module that is in preparation to be completed and then mated later with the crew module adapter and the service module. If you go even further down, the pressure vessel of the crew module for EM2 for Exploration Mission 2, which will be the first Orion to carry crew into space, is here and in preparation. And we've got a lot of things going on. In the next few weeks, the ascent abort crew module boilerplate that we'll use for the test will be delivered here and prepared for flight sometime in the spring. So again, I welcome you all and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bill. Our next panelist is Phillippe Deloo, ESA's Program Manager for the European Space Module, European Service Module.
Thank you, Kelvin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So it's a great day for me today on behalf of all the Europeans that have worked on the module which is behind me. We are very proud of the work we have done in Europe and that made this day possible. The delivery of the service module is a major milestone in an endeavor that started 7 years ago when NASA offered ESA to be part of the Orion program by building the service module. We were and we are still honored by the trust that NASA has put in the European capabilities to build a critical element to a US vehicle. We are conscious that this is a unique opportunity for Europe to be part of the exploration program that will write the next chapter in this history of human spaceflight. The service module is the powerhouse. Everybody's saying that. And we know how it is important to the mission. We have worked hard in Europe to make sure it will deliver the performance that is needed to achieve the mission objective of the coming mission for EM1, but also of all the following missions. It's an immense pleasure, pride, and satisfaction of having done a good job to stand here in front of you in the UNC building with the service module behind me. And I'm not shy to say that I believe this is one of the finest pieces and most sophisticated piece of engineering that Europe has ever done. Several engineers and technicians flew over from Europe together with the crew module, and they are ready to start to support NASA to integrate the service module with the rest of the spacecraft and start the functional testing of the integrated vehicle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phillippe. Next up is our Orion program manager, Mr. Mark Kirasich.
Thank you, Kelvin, and good morning. Wow, wow. This is a very special day for the Orion program. Orion is about human space exploration. And here in the operations and checkout building, Orion's factory, we either have or are in the process right now of manufacturing, integrating, and testing 5 crew modules. 5 crew modules have been in here. We have 2 now, the EM1 and the EM2 crew module immediately behind that. We've also in the Orion program executed 2 really successful test flights, a test of our launch abort system and exploration flight test 1, which sent an Orion crew module to an altitude of 4,000 nautical miles. But what happened a week ago last Tuesday with the delivery of this ESA service module, the powerhouse, we now finally have the element that enables, that allows us to take people farther into space than we've ever gone before. So it is a really big event for all of us in the Orion program. It's also a very special day for the people who made it happen. We have had partnerships with the European Space Agency throughout our human space flight. They continue strongly to this day with the International Space Station. But when we decided jointly 7 years ago, as Phillippe talked about, we said, boy, let's take this Orion spacecraft that's going to do the most demanding missions humans have ever gone on before, and let's split it in 2, and then let's integrate them together. That required that our teams take the concept of international partnership to a new level. And they have done that. The NASA, the ESA teams, our prime contractors, Lockheed Martin and Airbus, and the industrial team, they have worked really, really hard over the past 7 years to work through the technical challenges, the cultural challenges, the engineering differences. And everything has to go just right. When we lower that crew module adapter, after we're done here today, by the way, we're holding this up a little bit. When we lower that crew module adapter, the 200 bolt holes have to align precisely. And more importantly, in 2 years from now, when we put this integrated spacecraft into space, the 2 halves have to interact and communicate flawlessly under the really demanding challenges that, first of all, human spaceflight requires and exploration missions require. So it's really quite an achievement, and I'm really thankful for the teams to making this day happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And next up, we have Sue Motil, the integration manager for the service module from NASA's Glenn Research Center in Ohio.
Wow, these people are tall. So, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Kelvin. So I again got to say that I am really, really excited to see this European service module here at Kennedy Space Center today. It has been a tremendous effort by everyone involved to do this. You know, I'm particularly looking forward to the work we'll be doing when we mate the European service module with the crew module and take that integrated stack and test that in Ohio. We have some amazing test facilities at NASA's Plumbrook Station in Sandusky, Ohio, where we can simulate the harsh conditions a spacecraft may experience during its mission around the moon. These are really critical next steps to launch. And I thank all of you for being here today to help celebrate this moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And finally, I'd like to introduce Jan Wörner, the Director General for the European Space Agency. Jan.
Thank you very much, and also from my side, a warm welcome. Warm welcomes are necessary if the wind is blowing as it is doing in Washington. So, I mean, really the cold wind, not the political wind. So, thank you very much to all of you, and thank you very much especially also to the people to make it possible. I mean, it looks so simple if you look here, just a pack of hard and software, but to make it really real, this is something I really appreciate. Thanks to all of them, and I can tell you that for me today, this is a very specific part in my life. When I was 3 years old, my father took me on his arm and said, "Look, Jan, there you see Sputnik." I did not see it. But if your father tells it to you, you see it immediately. So this was 1957. And from then on, I started to really be inspired in space. Also, I have to apologize, a civil engineer. So in 1958, of course, Explorer 1 and the birthday of NASA. 10 years later, 1968, Apollo 8 flying around the moon with this very nice picture. 1978. What would you say about 1978? I'm sure not so many people would say big things, but there was a very important thing. It was not here in the world. It was more on the other side of the Cold War. It was in Soviet Union. The first non-Russian astronaut or cosmonaut was flying in the Intercosmos program, 1978. It was from Czech Republic. 1987, I know it's not 10 years later, but because Ronald Reagan has not so many quotes, I used 1987 because I'm, as you immediately recognized by my most common language, spoken English, that 1987, this was Ronald Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And 1 year later, he was here. I hope some of you saw him over here. And what he said over here, I will also quote, "The truth is our space program doesn't invest in machines, it invests in people. And you don't launch rockets, you launch streams." So a very nice quote from Ronald Reagan, 1988, 30 years ago. 20 years ago, we heard already the International Space Station. Then about 10 years ago, I had the first meeting with a NASA administrator. And this was a very depressing meeting for me. Because I came there and said, now I'm in space, now I want to do something big with NASA. And she said, yes, we are ready to take you on board, but never on the critical path. Just 10 years ago, and it was reality. And now we are here, we are looking to the ESM, or as I'm always saying, MPCV, ESM, but of course I'm very happy that you are using the name Orion, because most of the Americans don't know why, but it's very clear. In the 60s of last century, there was a European movie called Orion, and this movie had, interesting enough, had an American commander, but a Russian security officer. So that was in the 60s, and therefore for me this is really a picture of international cooperation, and this is for me also important. Competition is a driver, this is very clear, but cooperation is an enabler. And for that, I'm very, very grateful from the European side. And when I heard earlier to says we are not talking about flags and national footprints, I think this is exactly what humans deserve, what also they can expect from us. The power of exploration is clear. It is, of course, it is science, it is technology, it is international cooperation, and it is, of course, international cooperation, not just that, but also beyond earthly crisis and earthly difficulties. And therefore, as I always say, what we can deliver with space is, of course, a return of investment in financial matters. Yes, we can. This was some other quote. But it's also about fascination, inspiration, and motivation. We have to motivate, especially the young people, really not to be frustrated, but to go ahead into the future. I know in America this is simple. In Europe it's a little bit more difficult to inspire people to go ahead. But with fascinating missions and inspiring missions, we can do also motivate the future and the young people for the future. And therefore I call it the chain of innovation and chain of motivation. And we say we will not go back to the moon. We will go forward to the moon. We will go in a totally different way to the moon, not in a competitive method, but in a very cooperative manner. And this is, therefore, I'm very sad that Jim Bridenstine could not do it today, but I have a small present for him, and I will hand it over here. It is something which he can use, and he should use very soon. And this is over here. You see, it's the moon, of course, the moon. And this is where he can sit down, relax, and think about the next steps with these Europeans. Thank you very much.
How cool is that? So now that we've met our panel members, we're going to start with the questions. So question number one, for Phillippe. You've told us a bit about the work the team has done to get to this point. Can you tell us a bit more about what you have learned from building and testing the first service module for Orion?
Well, I have to say that the team has worked very hard to get where we are. Challenges were enormous, and I will just go through a few of them to tell you what were those challenges and what we've learned from them. The first one, this is the first time the Europeans are making a crew transport, are participating into a crew transport vehicle. Yes, we built several elements for the station, Columbus, Node 2, Node 3, Cupola. These were crewed modules, but they were not transportation modules. We also built ATV, who was a cargo transportation module, could accommodate the crew while it was on the station, but there was no crew on board during the launch. Having the crew on board during launch has tremendous different, or let's say significantly different safety requirements. So number of equipments that was existing in Europe from our previous developments had to be adapted and modified in order to comply to the crew safety requirement. The next challenge is this vehicle, this Orion vehicle, is complex. We're providing a major subsystem, therefore the interfaces are complex. We had to work those interfaces across the pond. Airbus, Lockheed, had to define down to the very little details what those interfaces were and to make it work. We had also a number of challenges. We don't go to the bar next door. We go to the moon and beyond. So if you want to go there, you have constraints. Mass is a prime constraint. So we had to work very hard to keep the mass down and to try to satisfy the mass requirement. We also developed new advanced technology like the electronic pressurization system of the propulsion system. Up to now, in European development, there was a mechanical pressure regulator. You can compare that to the transition where your car were having a carburetor and now they all have electronic injection. This is the same type of transition. And something which was also noting, which is not usual, in order to accommodate the requirements of the mission and all the operational constraints, we had to develop a two-axis solar array drive system. So the solar array do not only rotate to track the sun, but they also tilt forward and backwards, which is quite a significant achievement. And I would finish by what has been a real challenge, which is the schedule. When we started the development in 2012, the crew vehicle was already under development for several years. It has successfully gone through the preliminary design review and was cruising nicely toward the critical design review. We were starting from scratch. We had to catch up, and it's never good, thinking about it, to be on the critical path. Every day, whatever you do something wrong because it adds schedule. So, but we had to do it. It was a challenge. And in order to overcome that challenge, we had to juggle between aspects of engineering, development, verification, qualification, processes, and in parallel, build the flight hardware, hoping that the flight hardware will be right. And I think in that, we are succeeding because we are not yet done with the qualification, but we're on a good track.
Thanks, Phillippe. Thanks for your insight.
Great.
So question number 2 for Jan. We are honored to have you here and to celebrate this milestone between our space agencies. What is it, in your eyes, that we've accomplished, and what are we celebrating today?
So, should I say I'm proud? No, that would be totally wrong, because first of all, it's not me producing this hardware. It's not me, not at all. It's even not my money. I mean, partly a little bit from my tax. But so I cannot say that I'm proud about what we are delivering here, but I can say that I'm very happy and that we feel very optimistic also for the future, that we can deliver together something which each of us could not do or would not do alone. And I think our tiny blue dot, pale blue dot as it's called, deserves this type of cooperation beyond national borders. And I'm very happy also at these days that we have the situation that the International Space Station, also it's now a little bit limited crew right now, only 3 guys, but one of them is of course the commander, and the commander is right now a European astronaut with a similar accent like me, with a European accent, and with a German accent, and therefore, yes, I'm happy. I'm really, really in my heart, I'm happy that we can work together, and I hope that this is really just one step for further cooperation, and therefore I just can say, go Orion, go.
Thank you, Jan. So question number 3 for Sue. I understand we have some work taking place in White Sands, New Mexico for the service module as well. Can you tell us what's happening out there?
Sure. So let's be honest, who doesn't like smoke and fire? The propulsion qualification module, otherwise known as PQM, it was developed to validate the performance of the overall propulsion system on the European service module. The test campaign that we're doing at White Sands really focuses on, I think, what Phillippe touched on, the pressurization system, as well as test out hot fire all the engines. The test team at White Sands recently conducted 2 very important tests. These tests enabled us to have confidence that we could ship the European service module. And that was, agreed between, NASA and ESA. We were really quite excited when we did see the propulsion system get tested. And then, that enabled ship from the Bremen, Germany production site to the Kennedy Space Center here. We do have more tests coming, so we'll complete some tests this year, as well as testing in the spring of next.
Thanks, Sue. So question number 4, we'll direct this to Mark. the arrival of the service module is a significant milestone on our way to the first launch of Orion and SLS. So Mark, what's next for the service module as we continue to move ahead towards launch?
Yeah, well, first, Calvin, it is a really big milestone. And since the service module arrived here 10 days ago, it was Tuesday morning last week, the teams have operated really well together. The European teams are down here. The plane landed at about 11 a.m. and by 4 p.m. the service module was in the building. So what we're going to do now and what we'll keep doing for the next several months is integrate and test to make sure these vehicles function well together. I talked about the teams we have here, and I think to give you a better understanding of what actually goes on, I'd like to introduce a couple members of the team. I'd like to start with Amy Marassia. Amy, could you tell us a little bit more about what this integrate and test is all about?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to provide a brief timeline of the assembly, integration, and testing that will happen with the service module in the next few months. As you can see, our first activity is here in the lift station. We are structurally mating the crew module adapter with the European service module. Alignment is a critical part of the process. It's taking a little bit of time. Of course, we're bringing together two elements that were built on different sides of the ocean, so that's kind of to be expected. Once we do get the alignment correct, 192 bolts will be installed, which will complete the structural mate. After that mate is complete, the service module will move to the clean room. That's right behind the lift station. In the clean room, we will do more than 30 welds and 20 mechanical fitting connections to complete the propulsion and environmental control and life support systems. To verify the integrity of those welds and fittings, we will move the service module to a proof pressure cell where we will pressurize the systems with helium and check for leakage. Once we pass those tests, we'll move the service module a little further down the aisle in the factory to a multifunction station. Some additional components will be installed. Some of those components are the star trackers, the cameras, and the phased array antennas. After that, we do have a lot of electrical harness connections to do that will basically mate the power, command, and data harnesses between the two modules. Of those connections, 68 of the mates involve the European service module harnesses. We will also then load the coolant systems with their fluids in preparation for functional testing. When we get into functional testing, we start with the initial power on, which is planned for January of next year. After initial power on of the avionics, we will begin to integrate all of the different subsystems, including the propulsion, the coolant systems, the communications and guidance between the two modules that we have here. After that, the service module will undergo environmental tests. We have a thermal cycle test planned for February, and we do have a acoustic test planned for March. Once we successfully pass those tests and have some remaining assembly activities to do, the service module will be ready to integrate with the crew module in May of 2019.
Thanks, Amy.
Not quite yet. We're not done yet, Calvin. And Amy, by the way, thank you. And thanks to you and your team for everything you're doing here. We know the spacecraft's in good hands. Now, once we're done here at Kennedy Space Center, we're not done totally checking out the spacecraft. As Sue alluded to, we put it on an airplane and fly it to Ohio, to an incredible facility there. Sue, could you talk about what we do there?
Yeah, sure. So as Mark mentioned, once the spacecraft is integrated and tested here, we're going to transport this integrated spacecraft to Ohio via NASA's heavy lift aircraft, and it's called the Guppy. So that will land in Mansfield, Ohio, and we'll truck that on up to NASA's Plumbrook Station in Sandusky. I talked a little bit about that earlier. But the Space Environment Complex there has the world's largest vacuum chamber. It is about 100 feet in diameter and 122 feet high. And that is one of the reasons that Orion chose that facility because of its size and its capability. And one of the unique things that as we were preparing these facilities for testing of Orion, we discovered that the construction of this facility the unique shape as well as the material that was used in the facility made this an extremely reverberant facility when it comes to electromagnetic interference. And we said, oh my God, we can take this facility and we can bathe a spacecraft in this, what we call EMI or EMC. And it became a better test other than predicting, well, what are the points on a spacecraft where we might have, some issues. We can literally bathe it in this phenomena. And that was another reason why Orion chose that facility. And we're going to be conducting these tests probably over a 72-day period, I think 67 days for a thermal vac, and then we'll do another 5 days on the EMI, EMC. And then once we're completed there, Mark, we're going to ship it back to KSC and get ready for launch.
Thank you, Sue. And at that point, that's when I see some members of the Kennedy Space Center ground ops team in the audience. That's when we finally hand the spacecraft over to you for integration with the launch vehicle. So get ready, it's coming. It's coming really quick. Next stop after that, by the way, is the moon.
Thanks, Mark. Sue and Amy, appreciate it. So question number 5. Bill, can you give us an update on the status of the other parts in the system, the Space Launch System rocket, and the facilities here at the Kennedy Space Center, where we are and what lies ahead?
Yes, thanks for asking, Kelvin. We're making significant progress on all fronts. In addition to the achievements we're celebrating here today with Orion and the European Service Module, Exploration Ground Systems in September celebrated the rollout and roll back into the vehicle assembly building of the mobile launcher. That's pretty significant. I had somebody explain to me or suggest to me that what we built with the mobile launcher was basically a skyscraper, and we built it so you can move it around, and it's pretty significant. It's now in the vehicle assembly building, going through multi-element verification and validation tests, and those are going well. On the Space Launch System, elements preparation continues to make great progress. As you may know, the RS-25 engines, which were formerly the Space Shuttle main engines, we're using those for the core stage for SLS. For the Exploration Mission 1, we've completed those. They're all ready. They're in bonded store at Stennis, waiting for the completion of the core stage so we can integrate those with that. The interim cryopropulsion system, our interim upper stage, has been delivered and is in storage over at the space station processing facility next door. So that's ready to go. The core stage, which is the backbone of our space launch system, is in assembly at the Michoud assembly facility in New Orleans. We're making good progress there. There's been some challenges because it's the first time we've ever built something like this, and one of the challenges has been our engine section, where we'll have all the plumbing and all the thrust vector controls for 4 RS-25 engines. I had a colleague suggest to me the other day that there are more parts in the engine section than there are in a 737, which is pretty significant if you think about it. But we're in the home stretch on the engine section. We're making good progress there. The key to understand what we're doing, we have to do it right the first time, because this is not the only one that we're going to build. Very similar to the European Service Module, this is a multi-decadal endeavor to go explore around the moon and then onto Mars. So we're building the foundation, and we'll get integrated and fly it in 2020. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. So going to question number 6, I want to turn back to our program managers, Mark Kirasich and Phillippe Deloo. How is what we are doing for Orion and building the service module different from what we've done building for missions closer to Earth, like where the space station flies?
Sure. Well, it starts with the distance, and then the distance drives duration. But for example, our space station, which we've operated now for a long period of time, is 250 miles above the surface of the Earth. And to get there from the Kennedy Space Center here takes about a day, and to get home, if you have a problem, can take a little longer than an hour and a half. So it's relatively speaking, relatively close, relatively easy to get to. With Orion, we're going to go to places 1,000 times further. For example, our first flight, we're going to go over 250,000 miles away from the Earth. And it takes days to get there. It will take 5 days to get there. And if anything happens to the spacecraft once we're out there, if there's a contingency or if a crew member has to come home, it takes days to get back. It'll take 4 or 5 days to get back. So we have had to accommodate these things in Orion, and Orion is designed to support people for these extended duration trips and for these long distances. Also, when you leave the cocoon of low Earth orbit, the environments can become more extreme. Thermal environments, for example, the hots are hotter, the colds are colder. The radiation environments can be severe, so we have to harden all of the components of the vehicle to withstand these extreme environments. And I think to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of design, Phillippe.
Yes, as I said earlier, if you want to go far, you have to travel light. So it means that the mass has to be very low. Just to give you an order of magnitude, it costs 10 times more to go to the moon than going to low Earth orbit in terms of resources from the launch vehicle. So from day one, NASA imposed to us a very stringent mass requirement. We tried to negotiate to get more. We tried several times. We were not successful. So we had to go on diet. Every day we had to go on diet. And well, you know what happens with diet. You do an effort for a few weeks, and then something happens, and then you lose it all because you have to recover. And then you have to go on another diet. So we have been on diet for about 7 years. We are not quite there yet with the ESM-1. We are not compliant to the mass requirement. We had to take some shortcut because of the schedule. But we have plans for the future modules to be compliant. We have the plans to be inside. It's just, let's say, less important for ESM-1 because there's not a crew module, so it's not really mass constrained, but future mission will be mass constrained, and there we will have it right.
Thanks, Phillippe and Mark. So Phillippe, I wanted to follow up with you. We're talking about future service modules. So what will be the differences between this service module and the next one?
Well, sorry. Yes, there will be some differences, and differences for two reasons. One reason is, like for the mass, we had a schedule constraint, and we could not get the design developed exactly the way we wanted in order to meet the requirement. So since the ESM-1 mission is not a crewed mission, there are certain things that have not been implemented. One example is what we call the helium crossfeed. This is a feature in the pressurization system of the propulsion, which allow, in case of the failure of one branch, to branch the two branches of the propulsion system and to have both the fuel and oxidizer pressurized by the same helium tank. So this is something that we had not the time to implement for ESM-1 and will be implemented on ESM-2. And it's a crew safety feature, and therefore why it's needed for ESM-2. Another example are the gas tank, oxygen. So we don't fly any oxygen tank on ESM-1. The crew is not on board, so nobody needs oxygen. So we could afford to leave this one out. Now, the other reason why we will have to modify the spacecraft for future module is also evolutions of the mission. When we started putting out the requirements for the service module a few years back, we had some generic mission. Those generic missions have evolved. NASA has refined their missions. And doing that new requirements have been created. One example are the on-orbit loads. We have on-orbit loads that came in the middle of the program. The solar array drive adapter, which is this mechanism orienting the solar array at strength limitation, which are okay for ESM1, but with the operation that will be foreseen for ESM2 and ESM3, it needs to be reinforced. So there are also evolution of the vehicle that are driven by the consolidation and the evolution of the missions.
Thank you, Phillippe. So next question, number 8, going back to you, Bill. The service module is a critical part of our future exploration plans at the moon. What role will Orion and the service module play in assembling the gateway?
Well, it's very similar to the space shuttle and its activities constructing the International Space Station. Orion, the European Service Module Space Launch System, is the integrated vehicle that we'll use to build out the gateway. Once launched, Orion will separate, and once launched and on the way to the moon, Orion will separate from the upper stage, do a maneuver, and turn around and dock with the gateway element, pull it out of the universal stage adapter, and then act as a tug to take the new gateway element to the gateway orbit. We are the transportation system, and we know that. The Orion service module provides the power and the propulsion to move Orion around in space, as well as the gateway elements. It is critical in getting to the area of the moon and getting in and out of the gateway orbit. We choose to do it this way with Orion and the astronauts, to have the astronauts available on site to work with docking the gateway elements successively as we build out the gateway, and to have the astronauts there to deal with any kind of unknown or unanticipated problems, and as well as to activate the elements.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, to wrap things up, our final questions pointed towards Jan. I know ESA is excited about human exploration at the moon. What's next for ESA?
So the very next is the weekend, but after that, I have to explain a little bit, some minutes. So we have 22 member states. So we have not only one Congress in DC, we have 22 member states with 22 parliaments, with 22 presidents or chancellors, plus we have Slovenia and Canada as special members. So we have to convince 24 states to do something with ESA, for ESA, whatever you call it. We asked them some weeks ago to meet as a preparatory phase. We call it the intermediate ministers meeting, because normally they meet all 3 years. So we said we should meet in between. And we gave them our narrative of the future. And the narrative of ESA in the future is to be active in many, many fields. We name them now 4 fields. The first one is science and exploration, which is already for our delegates, which are not the ministers, some difficult thing. We have mandatory and optional programs, and we are mixing them up right now. So that means science and exploration is pillar number 1. Second pillar is space safety and security for exclusively peaceful purposes, I have to add in addition. Third one is applications like Earth observation, navigation, telecommunication. And the fourth one is what we call enabling and support, which starts with technology, with space transportation, and then also with operations. So these 4 pillars are now set, and we are in preparation for the next Ministerial Council, which will happen exactly, more or less exactly in 1 year's time. And what we need is great ideas for great money. So we are still behind NASA. I have to apologize for that. We are at something like $7.5 billion overall, which is far below what you are doing, but it's a good basis for being a strong partner. And a strong partner for the gateway, lunar gateway. We will propose to our member states in exploration 3 destinations, which is low Earth orbit, Moon, and Mars. But of course, as we heard earlier, to go to Moon is already, if you have a travel duration of 1 week or a little bit more. It's already something for the astronauts. I mean, from the point of security and safety. If you go to Mars, we all know that it takes a little bit longer, we should say. But therefore, we believe that humans to Mars will happen, but maybe a little bit later. Therefore, we see the Lunar Gateway, of course, as a test bed, as a stepping stone, and I call it always as a pit stop. That means from there we can go together either to the surface of the moon with robots or with astronauts. We can create the moon village. Of course, I'm always eager to do that. And of course, also it's possible to go beyond moon. So therefore, just to answer your question, we will, the Director General, as it is said in our convention, will propose to its member states, to the member states of ESA, a great story for the future. We need your help, and then we have a good money to go together.
Thanks, Jan. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to all the panel members for sharing your insights and where we're going in the future with Orion and the European Service Module. Thanks again. And I'd also like to thank everybody for attending here in person and those people watching on TV. Hope everybody has the opportunity to make it back here for that first launch in 2020. Just think how exciting that will be to see Orion on top of the Space Launch System rolling out the VAB to that launch for that first exploration mission 1. That's going to be very exciting. And again, what we're doing is hard. Human spaceflight, deep space exploration is hard. It's complex. We ask our teams to stay curious, keep asking questions, and keep moving forward. So thank you again, and we're going to close with one more video.
From the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at T-minus 3 hours and holding.
It is great to be in Florida today, and the rocket is ready to go fly. The team is ready to go fly.
Education, not only for our expanded knowledge of the universe, but for the improvements you have contributed to on Earth. Have an excellent mission and Godspeed.
Crew ingress and work at this time.
Flight crew O2C, close and lock your visors and initiate O2 flow.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. All engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and lift off.